Do you know the best way to fund your early retirement years? Or perhaps it's not even early retirement, but a period when work takes a back seat in your life. Covering your expenses during these coveted years without a traditional job can be challenging if you're not well prepared, especially given the strict rules around accessing retirement funds. But I have a solution for you, and it's not as complicated as you might think. In this video, I'm going to explain why so many early retirees get this wrong. I'll show you the best tool you can use to fund your early retirement and how to use it to your advantage, including paying very little or maybe even $0 in taxes. And I'll share some of the often overlooked benefits of this tool just to convince you that it's something you should use. Let's start with why even the most devoted money enthusiasts sometimes get this wrong. Early retirement has surged in popularity over the last 15 years. Those pursuing financial independence understand they need to accumulate wealth to fund their freedom from traditional employment. Instead of saving a small portion of their income, they dramatically increase their savings rate to buy back their time before reaching traditional retirement age. This accumulated wealth is then used to fund an extended period of time free from work. This concept applies even to those who don't want to leave work entirely. Some may aim for semi-retirement or even embrace a coast-fi lifestyle, covering their expenses while their accumulated wealth grows in the background. Ultimately, it requires significant wealth accumulation to fund this freedom and flexibility, regardless of what shape it takes. This group is often referred to as the FIRE movement, which stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. These are some of the savviest money enthusiasts I know, but we sometimes make mistakes, and I include myself in that statement. With such a strong focus on wealth accumulation, countless strategies emerge to optimize the path to financial freedom. These strategies typically focus on one primary goal: generating as much wealth as possible. And that's where we in the FIRE movement often go wrong. Instead of identifying specific goals and working backwards from those, it's easy to fixate solely on growing our net worth. Stephen Covey, author of the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, suggests it's best to begin with the end in mind. But that's not the common path for those of us in the FIRE movement. Specific goals, like when to stop working or what lifestyle to live, often become afterthoughts. Something we'll figure out later. How do I know this? Because I've seen it countless times, and I've been guilty of it myself. For years, I've followed the conventional advice to max out tax advantage retirement accounts, and this includes a 401k, simple IRA, and Roth IRAs. I didn't consider how or when I'd need access to these funds. I simply saved, assuming it would be beneficial later. I wasn't thinking about my early retirement withdrawal strategies, or actually any withdrawal strategies at all. This is the mistake that even the most financially savvy make. We don't align our accumulation strategy with our end goals. We simply save, and try to maximize that tax savings now. And I know it's an afterthought because we identify workarounds to access retirement funds early without then paying the penalty. All to make up for this failure to articulate clear goals and then work backwards from there. Generally, there are 2 strategies for accessing retirement funds prior to a traditional retirement age without paying a penalty. The first is what's called a Roth conversion ladder, and the second is 72T, substantially equal periodic payments. Wow. That is a mouthful. The Roth conversion ladder is a strategy used to access retirement funds before the traditional retirement age. Here's how it works. You move money from a pre-tax retirement account, something like a traditional IRA or a 401k, over to a Roth IRA. This is done in what's called a ladder format, meaning you convert a portion of your funds each and every year. The converted amount becomes available for withdrawal without a penalty after the 5-year waiting period. For example, money converted this year would be available for use 5 years from now. This is thanks to the rule that says you can withdraw Roth contributions after a 5-year waiting period. But even the strongest advocates for this strategy will warn you of a couple of concerns. The first is that you need to plan ahead, as you can't access the converted funds immediately. Again, there's a 5-year waiting period. And the second is that you need to pay taxes on the amount you convert each and every year, as you're moving money from a pre-tax account to an after-tax account. This strategy can be useful for those pursuing early retirement or even financial independence, but it does require careful planning and consideration of your current and future tax situations. The other strategy, 72T, substantially equal periodic payments, which abbreviated is SEP, is another strategy for accessing retirement funds without incurring penalties. Now here's a summary of how this one works. It allows you to withdraw money from your IRAs or 401ks before the age 59.5 without paying the 10% early withdrawal penalty. Now you must take at least one withdrawal per year for either 5 years or until you reach the age of 59.5, whichever one is longer. If you're retiring early in your 30s and 40s, that means it's a really long period of time. The withdrawal amounts are calculated using one of 3 IRS approved methods: required minimum distribution, fixed amortization, or fixed annuitization. Wow, that was a mouthful. And executing each one of these strategies is much more complicated than pronouncing them. While this strategy provides earlier access to retirement funds, it is complex and inflexible. It's generally recommended to consult with a financial advisor before implementing this strategy. Now, both of these strategies have significant drawbacks. One is overly rigid and requires you to commit to withdrawing a fixed amount until you are 59.5. And the other requires you to pay taxes on money that you won't use for 5 years. But they are the best attempts to fix earlier mistakes of saving too much money in your tax advantage accounts. Now, if we were to actually begin with the end in mind, we would avoid this mess altogether. Now, if your goal is to gain freedom earlier in life, whether you call that early retirement or something else like semi-retirement or coast-fi, I'd like to suggest that the goal shouldn't be to have the largest net worth possible. Instead, it should be to save and invest in the buckets that allow you to access the funds when you want or need to access them. And when you do that, I think you begin to see that there is a much better and simpler solution. Now enter the taxable brokerage account. A taxable brokerage account is an investment vehicle accessible to everyone. You can open one with any broker and use after-tax money to buy and sell stocks, bonds, and other securities. When my wife and I began embracing a coast-fi lifestyle, I had one major realization. We had underutilized our taxable brokerage account. The large majority of our investments were in accounts that we couldn't even touch until 59.5. I've since come to realize that the taxable brokerage account is the ideal investment vehicle that can be used prior to a traditional retirement age. And when paired with a basic understanding of how long-term capital gains are taxed, it can be just as efficient as many other accounts while maintaining its first major benefit: flexibility. So the first major benefit is that you have flexibility both in contributions and withdrawals. Since contributions are after tax, there's no limit on how much you can invest annually. This sharply contrasts with tax advantage accounts like 401ks, 403bs, and taxable IRAs, or even Roth IRAs, which all have specific contribution limits. But the flexibility doesn't just stop at contributions. You can sell and withdraw funds from a taxable brokerage account at any time, unlike most tax advantage accounts. So why does this matter? It allows you to use these funds for significant life events before you reach retirement. For example, take our recent home purchase during a period of sky-high interest rates. Instead of taking on a hefty mortgage for the difference between our new home's price and the equity from our old home, we sold off some investments in our taxable brokerage account to buy the house outright. And some might argue that keeping those funds invested would yield better long-term results, but we prioritize immediate flexibility and freedom by reducing our monthly expenses. For us, this trade-off was worth it. The second major advantage is unlimited investment options. Unlike those pesky employer-sponsored plans like 401ks, which typically offer only 10 to 20 investment choices, the taxable brokerage account gives you access to a vast array of investment options. This freedom allows you to select options with low or no fees, potentially maximizing your returns even further. The third benefit relates to passing assets to heirs. The taxable brokerage account receives what's called a step up in basis. It's a tax provision, meaning that heirs will only pay taxes on capital gains above the fair market value at the time of the inheritance. If they sell the investments immediately after inheriting the account, the capital gains would be practically $0. Now, this is amazing, but it's the fourth and last benefit that is the true game changer. And last but not least is the favorable taxation on the investment growth. Because the account is initially funded with after-tax dollars, you're only taxed on capital gains, which is effectively the difference between the sale price and the purchase price of the investment. But the real advantage lies in aligning these assets with your income. The IRS uses a separate tax bracket for long-term capital gains. For 2025, if your taxable income is below $96,700, you'll pay 0% on long-term capital gains. And I'll say that again because I think it warrants repeating. You'll pay 0% in taxes on the long-term capital gains below this amount. This is ideal for early retirees or those scaling back their careers. For instance, we just realized about $20,000 in long-term capital gains this year. And since our income will fall below the threshold that I just mentioned, we won't pay any tax on those capital gains. This benefit is akin to a Roth account's tax-free retirement income. However, the taxable brokerage account has a huge advantage. You can withdraw investment gains before the traditional retirement age. So while we can access the Roth contributions after 5 years, as I mentioned earlier, we can't touch the gains in our Roth account before age 59 and a half. The taxable brokerage account doesn't have this limitation. Though there are limits to this tax strategy, the combination of the flexibility and the favorable tax treatment makes it an excellent way to fund early retirement. If you're aiming for early retirement or planning to intentionally downshift your career, investing in a taxable brokerage account is crucial. Now, to be clear, I'm not suggesting prioritizing a taxable brokerage account over the other options. There's still a place for 401ks and Roth IRAs, but I believe the savviest investors will use all three vehicles, pre-tax, Roth, and taxable, to maximize flexibility in their later years. And don't just take my word for it. The Mad Fientist, who is well known for publishing strategies for accessing retirement funds early, but even he in his articles says this about a taxable brokerage account. This is the easiest option and what most people would do if they knew they needed to access that money before standard retirement age. So start by articulating that you'll need to access money before traditional retirement, and then build a strategy that aligns with that goal. But what's your take? Do you think the taxable brokerage account is the best way to fund early retirement? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes it feels like figuring out the math and tax implications for early retirement is the easy part. Figuring out how we spend our time is much more challenging. If this sounds like you should watch our video on designing your ideal life. Thanks so much for watching and enjoy the journey.